And welcome to this week's edition of Making Sense. And the big news over the past couple of days, of course, is now we finally, Francis heard, have a election date for the local government elections. And yes, there's service delivery reasons to vote or not to vote. There are moral reasons to vote or not to vote. There are historical reasons to vote or not to vote. We'll get into that in a couple of minutes from now. But the irrationality of voting, I think, is such a great way to start this. What does that actually mean?
So it's irrational to vote. That's what I can tell you.
Oh.
It's completely irrational to vote. And I'll tell you why. Theorists look at this and it's interesting because they talk about the paradox of voting. It's irrational to vote. I'll tell you why, but people still vote.
Mm.
Now, the reason it's irrational is because you vote because you like a certain party, right?
Mm.
And you like a party to be in governance. Is your one vote out of millions of votes going to make any difference to the outcome of the election? Statistically, no. Most times, almost all of the time, you as an individual will have no real impact on the election.
Mm.
Your vote will count for nothing, because it's one of many,
yeah.
right? And then obviously if there's a swing vote, a vote where there's two candidates that are really close.
Like council seats might become important.
Yes,
yeah.
or whether the race is tight,
Yeah.
right? Then maybe it starts to count a little bit more, but still statistically irrelevant. So it's irrational to vote. And then economists start making it even more complicated.
As they do.
So they look at, okay, say you've got party A and party B. You try and work out what is the economic difference between them. How much more economic value will party A deliver over party B, which is hard to tell. And then you've got to add that in. And then economists also, I'm sure you've heard of opportunity costs.
Mm.
So anything you do has an opportunity cost because you can't do something else. Now, voting is quite onerous because you've got to stand in the line. You hopefully educate yourself. You've got to figure out what these parties stand for. And there's an opportunity cost because you could be doing something else.
Yes.
You could make better use of your time. You could chill. Even if you think that voting is doing something good, maybe an argument could be made that actually it would be better for you to spend those 3 hours that you would stand in the line working at a soup kitchen. Or
changing the lives of people practically.
Exactly.
Right.
Do something that really has measurable benefit, because voting has no measurable benefit. But obviously we get to this, there's even a theory about it, the generalization theory. If everybody thought like this, nobody would vote. So probably on that basis, I think it's worth voting. There's other bases that people are looking at. Well, why do people vote? Maybe it's kind of cool sometimes and you want to show people that you voted. Maybe you are expressing yourself. So for some people, for some reason, a lot of us go out and vote, even though it is irrational.
How much do you think, outside of the statistical analysis that you've given us, how much of the going out to vote for local government elections, which is now coming up later this year, is peer pressure? How much do you think of it is, well, I need to go vote? I'll tell you why, because I'll just use my little circle of friends, that if they don't go vote and I don't go vote, or if they don't go vote and I go vote,
yes,
I can't actually have a political debate with them on a Friday evening over a couple of beers, because I immediately, and maybe this is just me, but I immediately discredit them because they haven't voted. And I suppose it becomes that old adage of, well, if you don't vote, you don't get to complain.
yes.
But I'm not sure what complaining as a voter's actually achieved either. So I'm flip-flopping a bit, but I'm trying to figure out, am I better for voting than you not voting?
No, so you've picked up on what academics look at, because there's the shame of not
There's
voting.
the shame of not
which
voting.
It could be peer pressure. And people could say, oh, well, did you vote even? You've got no say if you don't vote.
You're shunned immediately. Yeah.
But that is peer pressure. It still doesn't make your vote count statistically. But there's other moral, philosophical reasons to vote. Some people would say it's just a moral imperative. And you can say that if you feel that. Maybe you can't justify it in economic or rational terms, but you can say there's a moral imperative here. And I think because of that generalization theory, that's probably what I cling to, that if we all wrote off voting because of these sorts of theories, it would be disastrous. We want a country where people are sort of active and democratically active. And that's why I vote. I think there's a little bit of a moral imperative, but I also think that people have a right not to vote.
Of course they do.
A right.
Of course they do.
To
and I
say
suppose
none of these parties appeal to me, so why should I bother?
And you took me to my point exactly, is that I think, and there's an argument for this, and I brought it up on ENCA before, and I'm sure we will as we head up to elections. There are so many political parties. There's so many. There's hundreds.
Yeah.
I think it's close to 500 these days. It might be a bit less.
Sure.
That most people would never have heard of, would never have thought of, but they wouldn't have even done that homework you're talking about, done that research before you go stand in the queue for hopefully half an hour, but it could be up to 6 hours,
Yes.
especially for local government elections. And it does make me wonder then why people are going through the effort of saying, I'm going to vote, but actually haven't done the work of who they're going to vote for as well.
Yeah, you need some basis.
Yes,
for that.
voter education.
Yes.
And the point I'm making there, of course, is that when you look at the voter apathy issue, because I'm looking at some of the research from the Institute for Race Relations, last elections 2024, and then before that local government elections, and the number of people that actually went out to go vote. I'll just give you the nerd numbers here very, very quickly as well. That local government elections in 2021, there was a 45.8% voter turnout. Now, this is interesting because the voter registration numbers were just over 60%. So still both quite low. Remember, voter registration
Yes.
and voter turnout. But I'm always been curious to find out what has happened between when I've gone to register to vote and a few months later, that number drops even lower. Now, I contrast this with, we all talk about 1994, of course, 86.87%. And there's been a decline each and every single time.
Yeah, so many factors come into play, and it's often blamed on young people that they're just apathetic. But those figures show that many go out and actually register to vote. Yeah, do they have a bad registration experience, or why don't they turn out on voting day? Is it just because nobody is speaking to them in a language they can understand and telling them why a change in governance could make a difference? Because traditionally, and voting is also an emotional thing, right? So a lot of people who just love the ANC voted for the ANC no matter what they did. Young people are maybe even more discerning, and that's why you've got to give them more. So don't blame the young people. Also blame the political parties for what they're doing, for what they're delivering, for what they're promising, and then if they get into power, are they delivering on those promises? And Gareth, I don't know the solution here. I think when the race gets exciting, then people will vote. And maybe we'll see a very interesting race in Johannesburg this year. I think we could see one of the most interesting local government elections yet. And maybe the traditional power, which in South Africa would be the ANC, right, has even more impetus to mobilize its support base in the face of competition. Democratic competition. Now that, yes, they had a poor showing in the national elections, the stakes are high for this local government election. And I have some economic reasons to vote, if you want.
I would love some economic reasons, because then after your economic reasons, I want to just turn our attention back to the fact that the youth, based on some research here, I'm trying to find who it actually came out, it's more of a commentary piece, was actually blaming the media for youngsters not coming out to vote, because all the media does is report on, back in the day, the load shedding, corruption, now the various commissions, and the youngsters, based on what I'm seeing here, don't feel it's actually worth voting for any political party. They'd rather just focus on themselves, their own jobs, their own families, their own lives as well. So there might be a mirror as you go to your economic perspective now. Maybe the media needs to hold up a mirror and actually just ask the question, are we helping or are we hindering the voting process?
Because, okay, so we want to hold all parties to account.
Correct.
Especially those in governance. It becomes harder once you're in governance because then you have a track record. Before you're in governance, what you have is a manifesto. And maybe as the media, we should be more clear to differentiate between the parties and what makes them similar and what makes them different.
Yes.
They also have to differentiate themselves on the ground. And especially once they're in governance, they have to give people a reason to vote. If people believe that nothing's going to change, that my vote can't change things because they are all as bad as each other, I don't know if that's the media's fault.
You see, you've nailed it on the head, actually. They're all as bad as each other. It's not the first time I've heard that. It's like, well, there's no point. They're all as bad as each other.
It's
politicians, which makes it difficult for the political parties because how do you then differentiate? And here's the problem with the way that the youth respectfully might look at this is as the media, we're going to interview Herman Mashaba, for example. I did just the other day. And the easiest thing for Herman Mashaba to do would have been to go after Helen Ziller. Well-documented issues between the two of them. But what you're not hearing and what the youth aren't hearing is what is Herman Mashaba going to do? Now, that argument might stand, but then you're going to get another aspect of the youth that are going to go, well, hang on, how are you doing it better than Helen Ziller is planning to do it? So you're immediately going to have that contestation. But it's becoming fatiguing and people are getting tired of this.
And traditionally, the DA used to take pot shots at the ANC.
Yes.
Right. So now they're being lauded to some extent for, in the Joburg campaign, showing what they would do and how they would do it. Because you can't just take pot shots at those in charge because that is pretty easy to do. It's always easy to do, right? And Gareth, before I get into this, let me just say that the ANC at a national level, I think is being, what's the word? It's not underestimated, sort of under-celebrated because some things have changed. And we've spoken about those economic green shoots. There is a reform program in place. And of course, it's the government of national unity. But a lot of this has been driven by the presidency, by the ANC officials in Treasury now. And we've seen things change at Eskom. There is change. And for years and years and years, I just remember being in the news talking about the same problems that had solutions, but still year after year, we talk about the same problems. We're now seeing what did they say? You're seeing the needle move. So Eskom is an example. Another example is visas for skilled people. And really, there has been a move to make it easier for people to get into the country if they should be here, or if economically it's good for us that they are here. You had these multinationals saying, we want to be here, but we need to bring in our top guys from overseas. I'm sorry, we do. They've got the skills we need, and they can't get a darn visa to come to South Africa. So things like that are being addressed. Transnet. There's some exciting moves to get private players on the tracks, sort of renting out the tracks, but suddenly getting the volumes up. And we had rail in decline for years. So there is move. I think the Achilles heel for the ANC is local government. And now we're going into local government elections. And a lot of people, it's an emotional thing. And what they feel is service delivery on the ground. And we've had ANC local governments in many areas, not all areas, but there have been issues. So my 3 reasons to vote are 16%, which is the Auditor General last year, looking at 2023, 2024. That is the percentage of local governments that received clean audits. Now, clean audits means your books are in order. You can show where the money went. There's no irregular expenditure, which is kind of when you're not spending in line with the law, when there's not, what's it called, paper trails, when you are complying. So sometimes there could be an issue with irregular expenditure. Maybe you're my cousin and I give you the tender. That's not allowed. And I can't prove that it's corruption, but it's irregular, right? Or wasteful expenditure. Remember, Eskom was buying knee pads with, I don't know, less than $100 for who knows how much. That sort of thing. 16%. That is dismal.
Yeah.
Dismal.
Far too
And
low.
the Auditor General is saying every year there are issues. At one point, she was saying that in Johannesburg, the biggest metro in Africa, they couldn't give the financial statements. They couldn't hand them over in an acceptable form, which accountants should be able to do, right? So you didn't even have the basic accounting skills required to put together the financials in Johannesburg.
The books didn't even look like books.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, which is kind of a way that other accountants can read the books, right? Then more than 100 billion owed to Eskom. That is from September last year. The figure was 105 billion owed to Eskom by municipalities. This should never have been allowed to happen. And it could be said that it was partly a political choice because Eskom, along the way, municipalities were racking up this debt. Eskom could have switched off whole municipalities. Then poor people suffer. Then women with children suffer. But this shouldn't have been allowed to get out of hand in the way it did, where these municipalities were simply not paying Eskom. There are measures to get that thing. And then finally, more than 100 billion rand again. That was what the local government association, SALGA, said last year in September, was the backlog in electricity infrastructure maintenance.
Yeah, I remember the story.
And local governments are not maintaining their infrastructure. They haven't for years. And you can bet that it's worse when it comes to water or equally as bad. The Auditor General has this week been talking about governance across Mangaung, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, and eThekwini, talking about weak accountability. And she raised water quality, saying water quality in some municipalities is now starting to pose a risk to residents.
So you've got the access to the water if you do, but the quality of the water is so low,
Yes.
it's not drinkable. It
Yes.
doesn't help anyone.
Yes. And remember, we had cholera in
Hammanskraal. Hammanskraal, yeah.
north of Pretoria. So that's when you're not doing the checks and balances to make sure that the quality is okay. And there's a problem. And what the Auditor General is trying to do now, it's not only looking at, 100 billion rand spent on fixing water quality, is 100 billion rand spent on, I mean, that's a high figure, whatever the amount is, spent on fixing water quality delivering. And she's saying there's a problem even with the billing, unreliable data from water meters. So if these 4 municipalities aren't even sure what's going on, then how are they going to start to fix the problem? So for me, 3 economic reasons: 16%, 100 billion owed to Eskom, and 100 billion backlog in just the electricity infrastructure maintenance.
And obviously, you're going to look at the economical side because obviously you're way smarter than I would ever be. France is able to make sense of that. For me, and maybe for you, we'd both love, of course, Francis and I, to get your comments because today is probably going to start becoming a bigger focus on making sense as we build up to the local government elections, now that we have a date, of course. And Francis has given the economic reasons. She's outlined very nicely the 3 reasons in her mind from an economic perspective, the impact it has. But when it comes to the local government elections, and tell me what you think as I land this plane, while I still have jet fuel to do that, of course,
while it's
still available for us. For me, and I've had this debate with many people that I know in my little circle, is the local government elections. If you are ever going to go through the trouble, go through the effort of reading up on the party that you want to vote for, go do the work and find out why you aren't voting for one of the other parties. Maybe you've got optionality. Go and actually read the manifestos. They've all got them. Go and read them. But I would argue that the local government elections for you and I and anyone watching now in my neighborhood, my area, my street, my potholes, my streetlights that aren't working, the water issues, this is arguably that election, the local government election, where you can't sit on the sidelines.
Yeah, because we're all starting to feel it.
Yeah, practically.
We're starting to feel the leakages. I had
Literally.
one that was fixed multiple times outside my driveway, and they were just coming back and not fixing it. And I live in a small crescent that seems to just be sort of exploding with water leaks, bursts. And that is the only way we're going to fix it, is let it move around, and then it it moves around, and eventually the infrastructure will be new. But this is so old, and I'll leave you with this. Somebody from Joburg Water told my husband the other day that this stuff was laid down in Van Riebeeck times, and I thought that was just so beautiful, kind of talking about how old the infrastructure is. But it is time. It is time because, and this affects the economy, of course. It affects property values, right? You can, as a young person, save up everything, work hard, buy a great house, sort of get some upward mobility. You buy a house and you land up in sort of a dud municipality that just stops caring. And sewage running in the streets. That's what happened in Mfuleni. And I do think it's going to be exciting. Maybe there's an argument because of the paralysis that we've seen because of coalitions to not vote for smaller parties. That's a whole nother debate.
That's another debate.
Yeah. But we've had coalitions where there's just been political infighting, maneuvering.
And maybe it's on that point where we end this, because I'm sure we're going to have a discussion. I'd love to do a course with Francis Hurd, and I'm sure we'll talk to many other political analysts, this splitting of the votes, the voting for the smaller parties, just because they've registered. There's too many parties. Many people have said before to us on ENCA. So what do you do? What do you do as we leave making sense for this week? How do you make sense of who to vote for? How do you know who to vote for? How do you know who not to vote for? And I suppose the key question is, as I say goodbye to you, does it make sense for you to vote? Love to get your comments. Love to get your views at the bottom. 4 November this year, we're going to local government elections. The question is, does it make sense for you at all? Thank you for watching. Thanks, Francis Hurd. As always, I'm back with you again next week. Bye-bye.